I bid you good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you may be watching this transmission. It is I, Mike Martins. And guys, I got a very important guest that I haven't had on in a while. He's been super busy with a lot of things on the go. And today we want to talk about a little bit of Australia here and what's happening down under. So I got someone that understands the markets, knows the markets, plays the markets, does well in the markets, and maybe give a little forecast on what's happening and what's going on. So, guys, before I kick off our guest on the show, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and look at the different videos we got going on and different topics. We got Mike in the Night every Saturday, Trends in the Housing Market on Wednesday, if you want to talk about housing, and Can't Read Market Talk, all kinds of stuff. Guys, I'm on this tea thing where I made my own t-shirts and mugs and pillows. So if you're a Mike in the Night or a Mike Martins fan, go on and buy something. And yeah, that's that. That's my plug right there. So it's time to bring on Senor Andrew.
How you doing?
Good. How are you, my brother? Good to hear from you. It's been a while. So
Yeah.
what's going on? So let's start off with one thing that you've been really concerned about, and I know you've been very concerned about. You actually messaged me quite a bit, and it's the fires in Australia. What's going on?
Yeah, so they've been going on for it's gonna be 3 months in January. But basically since the beginning of November we've had fires, and November is typically spring here, or yeah, so we don't normally get fires until like around now. They normally don't start until the end of December, but they started pretty much 2 months early. We're also in a mass. There's large parts of the country that have run out of water or are getting water shipped in. It's kind of like Flint, but around the country.
Okay.
So for me, I just think that there hasn't been enough of a focus on, like, this is regardless of what your view on climate change or any of that is. There hasn't been enough planning in infrastructure for something that's obviously going to be a problem. I mean, the fact that we have a large amount of immigration doesn't help, because all of a sudden water that would be used in other areas is being piped into our water supply at Warragamba, and we're consuming that. And there's not really that much, like up until a few months ago, there wasn't that much restriction on what you could and couldn't do with water. We've just had level 2 water restrictions imposed in the last few months.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
So
the thing that concerns me, like everyone's talking about the Amazonian fires and how that was such a big issue. Australia's fires are 5 to 6 times the size and land mass of that, and that's happened, in the last 2 months.
right. So how
So it's
many
quite a lot.
hectares? Do you know offhand how many hectares were burnt, or how many?
I don't know exactly. I can look it up for you.
Okay.
I
Because
think it's like, I don't know. I'm gonna have a look it up, but
because
I
what
know
happens? What happens if you have a lot of dry brush, right? You get a lot
yeah,
of dry brush. You get a lot of like crap that falls in the forest and stuff that starts to dry out. And what happens is if they don't control fire some of this stuff once in a blue moon, just to go in there once every couple of years just to clean it out and do some more controlled fires, I think they
yeah,
could solve this problem. But I don't think they're doing this because I mean you're gonna have a heck of a great regrowth in the next decade. You're gonna have lots of lush, and hopefully if you get a bit of rain you're going to have
yeah.
a
If we
nice
get rain, there
regrowth,
will be.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the big problem is that we haven't had rain. We haven't had any meaningful rain in probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, and we've been in drought before that for, well, like basically the whole year. There's been a conversation about drought, and then you've had these hot temperatures come in and dry winds and no rain has come. So
Yeah.
that's what you get. There's obviously been people out there that are, a bit sick in the head and go and start fires themselves. I'm not saying it's all.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that it's all.
3 years ago here where I was at, it was like a thick stew. We had about 660 fires at the same time,
Yeah,
and they were just fighting fires all spring and summer long. I mean, literally.
yeah.
It was a thick stew. You couldn't see, like, if you're driving on the highway, you couldn't see 3 miles ahead. I mean, you couldn't, no, not 3 miles,
Just
but
grey everywhere, right?
yeah, you can't see anything, and it's hard to drive
Yeah,
on the highways. It's hard to get through the mountains. And where I'm at, it's trees everywhere, right? So we're in the mountains, so so it was really tough for us. And then after we finally got the fires taken care of, they started having fires down in Washington State, and the wind was blowing north, and it was blowing that smoke up from Washington State up to where I'm at, and that made it even worse.
Yeah,
So
I think part of the problem in Australia is that there's not that much bushland, right? Most of it's just arid land. So when it does burn, it's burning in the areas where it's all populated. Whereas in Canada and America, you've got a pretty large spread of tree areas because the water isn't really all in one place. Um, the problem you have in Australia is that everyone lives on the coast, but they live on the coast because not just the fact that it's fresh drinking water, but also the fact that there's no infrastructure anywhere else and everything else is dry, and it would take a lot of money and time to transport water anywhere else.
okay, guys, here's
Like
some
if you
images. I'm throwing up some images for you guys to see right now what's happening there in Australia. Yeah, it's pretty bad. There's one here from 28 minutes ago, and it's pretty bad.
yeah, my one of my mum's friends um, has or is going to have a bushfire go through her house tonight, so we don't really know what's going to happen there. I don't know whether they'll lose their house or whether there'll be animals that die on their property or anything like that. But yeah, they're in an area called Bateman's Bay, which is it's about 3 hours south of Sydney.
Oh,
But the thing with the fires is that the landmass of the fire that's going on at the moment, like that's actually on fire at the moment, is bigger than the size of Sydney. So, and Sydney I think, is like 18,000 square kilometers or something like that. I'll have a look at it.
yeah. There's some posted here from like a day ago, 2 days ago, and it looks it looks intense, man. Burnt cars.
Yeah, yeah,
Here's the fire map here. Holy, the whole country is on fire, dude.
yeah. It's basically from
Darwin all the way
just
down,
yeah,
Brisbane all the way down to
but
Sydney.
it's not just Sydney though. Like you've had bushfires in Western Australia, you have them in South Australia, you have them in Victoria, New
Yeah.
South Wales. They've been on the southern part of
Perth
Queensland as
doesn't look
well.
Perth doesn't look that bad. It's where you're at that's really bad.
Yeah,
Where you're
yeah.
at is
Oh,
like
well, I mean,
huge.
the sky, like, I think there's been a handful of days where you've seen blue sky. Apart from that, it's just grey every day. And it's pretty depressing, really. I mean, Sydney is one of those places where you go just to make sure that you've got like clean air and you're going there as like a getaway from a big city that's kind of polluted, right? I mean, the fact that it's worse than, like, on some days it's been worse than Beijing is not really what you'd expect when you go on a summer holiday to Australia. But
A lot
that's
of
what we
people
have.
are losing everything here, man. This is really sad. Guys, man, we got to pray, But this is going to bring correction too. It will bring some sort of a correction, I guess, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to be positive
Yeah.
about it
Oh,
too, but
I mean, I hope for rain every day. Like it's you can't really do that much else at the moment because anything else requires a structural reform, and structural reform doesn't happen overnight.
right,
So I
right.
know you do what you can.
Yeah. All right, I got some stuff here I want to go over with you. If that's okay. Let's get on to the markets.
Sure.
Before we get into the markets, what the heck is happening in Sydney and North South and in New South Wales? Let's talk with housing really quick. What's going on? Housing is selling. Housing's going up, and some of them are going up 1 to 200,000 above the advertised price. I checked this article to make sure this article wasn't 3 years old. This article's seven
Yeah,
hours old.
yeah.
What's
There's
happening,
been a lot of
Andrew?
that. There's been a lot of that. You get three rate cuts, and then you get some accommodative macroprudential policy,
Right.
and they go back off to the races. I think a combination of the fact that the Royal Commission's over, you've had three interest rate cuts. They'll probably cut again at some point. I don't know whether they're going to cut in January or February. It'll probably depend on the Christmas sale numbers. Um, but my intuition says it'll probably be February. But again, you'll see it when you see it.
Is
I'm
the
not going to try
Australian
and call it.
proper making more money that I don't know about? Like, are they?
No, it's just more leverage. I think part of it is that there's been a lot of there's been a much larger shift towards non-bank borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the non-banks have been growing their portfolio of mortgages,
Mm-hmm.
and there's also been a loosening of credit standards. Basically, since I would say May this year, I think the federal election had a big impact on buying intentions because the Labor Party were basically saying we're going to put a bunch of restrictions on speculation in property, and the other party got in. So, I mean, that kind of gives an indication as to like it would have been bad for the economy in the short term. I think having those sorts of policies implemented because obviously negative gearing and those sorts of things, negative gearing and capital gains tax exemptions,
Right.
they give you an incentive to invest, right? But
Understandable,
I still
because
haven't seen investors return to the space. So to me, it says that this is kind of first home buyers or it's people downsizing. I would assume, but that can't be right either because most of the transactions that are occurring at the top end of the market. They're not occurring for in the first home buyer price range. Like you're
right.
looking at things like 1.5 million upwards are the ones that are selling a lot more rapidly or at a faster pace than, say, for example, than your first home buyer range, like a $500,000 to $700,000 price range in
Mm-hmm.
Australia. So it's kind of hard to say. Like, I still don't want to touch property with a 10-foot pole myself,
Mm-hmm.
but that's because I'm looking at it from a serviceability standpoint. And I mean, you can make the argument that interest rate cuts make it more serviceable, but the question remains: does like if it's especially for first home buyers, what percentage of first home buyers are going in
Right.
with a kid that they're already paying for, or are they planning to buy and then start a family? Because those sorts of considerations
Well,
are things that
it starts to throw a curveball into their total debt
well,
service ratio.
you can't really do the math on that. I mean, you
Right.
don't know how much it's going to cost to raise a kid. I mean, you don't know whether the kid's going to have any kind of learning difficulties. You don't know whether they're going to have health implications. You don't know whether they're going to do any kind of sporting activities in the time that they grow up. Like, I
Right.
don't think there's that level of thought process going into people when they buy. I think they buy expecting prices to go up for the foreseeable future,
Right.
and then they kind of haven't really done the math on how much it costs to raise a child or how much it's going to cost for future costs, right? Like
I got
they're making assumptions about income growth and those sorts of things when I haven't really seen any indication that there's going to be any kind of meaningful income growth anyway. I mean, unemployment's going up, not down.
right. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. We got that. Those job numbers in was it September, October, and they didn't look too good. Okay,
Yeah,
let's pull some key points from this article because they got some really good key points. But above here, they got a related story that says property prices surges as FOMO returns to Sydney and Melbourne housing markets. Do you see FOMO kicking off there, or is this just article just out there to spoof people?
I mean, you've got to look at it with kind of your a bit of skepticism, really. I mean, if you're reading it, what's the source that you're reading it from?
It's ABC News, always broadcasting
Okay,
crap.
that's yeah. I mean, that's pretty interesting. You'd think that ABC would be pretty balanced because they're supposed to be balanced as the public broadcaster. Generally, that kind of stuff you would see more so in something that's owned by one of the major publications because all the major publications
Right.
own a large amount of real estate reliant investment products. Like they either own like the Fairfax or like it's owned by Channel 9 now. They own 60% of Domain, which is one of the largest listing sites in Australia. The other one is what is it? It's News Corp, right? So News Corp in Australia owns realestate.com.au,
Yeah, that's
and that
correct.
as a
But
they're huge organizations. Like they're several
but that
billion
was a
dollar
recent
organizations.
purchase though. That was like a year, less than a year ago.
Yes, but Channel Nine, before it was owned by Channel Nine, the Sydney Morning Herald through Fairfax owned Domain entirely.
Yeah, that's
So it
correct.
was completely so the fact that um, they've acquired Fairfax. I mean, they say they merged, but it's not really a merge. It's more of an acquisition in my eyes. Um, but they then broadcast a thing called The Block on television here.
Hmm.
So there's a pretty large emphasis on uh, property in both television media and print publications. So I mean,
Okay,
that's
that's
why I'm kind of like there's always a skew towards the buy side generally in any news that you'll read.
okay.
It's very rare that you'll see someone that's bearish or a bit circumspect on property, and generally when they are, it's usually the ABC. There won't be anyone that kind of rocks the boat because they know where their advertising funding comes from.
So if the housing market seems to be doing well or seems to be on fire right now, why are are real estate agents now getting fined for these dodgy underquotings?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that going on, but I think part of it is to try and garner interest. And the other thing you've got to be mindful of is the transaction volume is still not going up. The
Right, that's
prices are
correct.
going up.
That's one
The
thing
prices are
we
going
know.
up.
Yes, yes, for sure.
Um, but there's still not the same transaction volume as there was in 2015. Like the thing that makes the banks money, and the thing that makes the listing agencies and those sorts of things money is turnover. It's not the price that they sell at per se. It's they're kind of like the way that I try to explain it to people is that a bank is more like a stockbroker than being like a proprietary trading firm. Like a stockbroker makes money off selling you the stock. They get a fee for selling you the stock.
Right, of
Whereas
course.
the prop trader makes money off buying the stock and then it going up in price, or shorting the stock and it going down in price.
Hmm.
They make the money off that. So it's kind of, I think the way that people think about it is a bit off compared to the way that it actually functions. So, I mean, the fact that bank prices are kind of gone sideways or fallen a little bit, whereas prices are supposedly going up at a rate of knots, there's a disconnect there. And that to me says that either they're not writing new volume or there's someone that's picking up a lot of volume, and then you should look at the credit practices of the people that are picking up the new volume.
Because this is almost, I don't know how to explain it, but it's, in my
It
opinion,
looks
it's
like US. It looks like what
it
happened in the
in
US.
2007 and 2008 with all that Mickey
Yeah,
Mousing,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
they're
I mean,
releveraging
well,
and
I would say even before
deleveraging.
that. I would say even before that. It looks like '04 to '06 US,
Right, with
but there's
jumbo
not the
loans.
same volume.
Jumbo
There's not the
loans.
same volume.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, the credit quality here is probably better than what there was in the US,
right.
but I think it's much more concentrated in terms of how much of the total economy it is.
Yeah, but the
Like in the US, you had securitization. There's a lot of securitization, but it was all on, it was like 20% of loans issued. So there was a
right,
lot of Mickey Mousing, but it was in that 20% of 25%. You're
right.
looking at in Australia, the mortgages are over 60% of the loan portfolio in the book. So even if there's less Mickey Mousing, they can afford to get away with less because there's so much of their lending portfolio that's in one place.
Right.
And you can blame the actual global organizations for that. The global organizations, um, in terms of risk weighting, because Basel basically said, and this is something you can look up yourself. The Basel organization have said there's different risk weights for mortgages in comparison to everything else. So you you make more profit on lending for mortgages. So all of a sudden, all the banks started lending for mortgages, and their risk profiles say that everything's fine. But they want to say that everything's fine because that's what they're being paid more money to say that everything's fine, even though you don't really know how much risk there is in a mortgage until people start defaulting.
Right.
Like
Right.
that's, I feel like it's there's a lag between when something's going wrong and when you know something's going wrong.
Could we? Is it okay if we touch a little bit on Westpac, an update on what's happening? I keep following and finding out more and more. The amount of like what
The
they've been.
23 million instances of anti-money laundering
Can you even count to 23
breaches.
million in a lifetime
I mean, it means that they basically have to be doing thousands of instances of anti-money laundering breaches per day,
per day?
which means that it's structural at that point. So they it depends on how long they were around. Like in Australia, there's supposed to be something called. I mean, in general, there's supposed to be continuous disclosure.
Right.
You're supposed to disclose something a maximum of 10 trading days after you become aware of it. Like you have a window of 10 days to make a market announcement, and it's generally price sensitive information.
Right.
But none of these financial institutions ever do that because they don't. They see it as something. Oh, we'll resolve it in our own time, and it's not going to be that big of a problem.
Right.
The focus is more so on how much profit they're going to generate, which then gets shown to their investors in their annual reports, which then justifies them paying themselves a bonus.
But
Like,
like, but isn't okay? Isn't there someone at a certain level that's looking at this and saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm packing my stuff. I'm getting the heck out of here, like ASAP." What? I
I
mean,
mean,
isn't there
I
somebody
think
that
there's kind of I
is
think
it?
there's kind of a boy who cried wolf problem with the banks. Like you can see there's a big problem there that people are aware of it,
Isn't there an
but they're kind
underwriter
of
or
like
somebody that could see this? Because what I'm thinking it's happening is more decarpentalized or whatever you have that however you say that word, where some people don't know what's going on, but the other people that are doing something don't know what's going on, so they don't get to see the
well, I
final.
mean, the credit rating agencies are supposed to be the people that are the arbiters of this kind of stuff, but
Right.
the question becomes how much does the government know and how much can financial institutions get away with? Like I got letters from our current prime minister from when he was our treasurer, basically telling me, "Oh, the credit rating agencies are the people that dictate this stuff. We're not going to get involved in it." And it's like, yeah, but the credit rating agencies were people that facilitated the global financial crisis. So you're
Yeah.
basing your assumption on what they have to say, and they're getting paid fees based on how much volume of credit
Yeah.
products that they put a stamp on.
Right.
So you're not really getting an accurate representation of how risky something is because they don't want to tell you how risky it is. If they tell you how risky it is, all of a sudden there's no reason in them rating it in the first place because like you're not going to know until it blows up. It's like a retrospective rating. The way that they do their risk modeling is entirely based on there always being credit available. As soon as there's no credit available, their models don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of point like when you need them to work, they're not going to work.
Yeah. It's
So
I'm very
it's
I don't know. I'm
yeah.
just I don't know. Okay, so let's move on to recession in Australia. With recession fears abated, luxury housing markets enter 2020. It looks like from a couple of these articles here I've been reading that everything looks good, that Australia seems to be recession proof.
I don't see it. I really don't see it. Like I keep hearing it, but I don't see it. I don't see that the Australian economy is taking off in any meaningful way. I mean, there's not much wage growth. Like wage growth is basically tracking inflation or it's slightly under inflation. Um, GDP growth is basically entirely tied to commodity prices. Without commodity prices, the Australian GDP is going backwards.
Right.
And like if that's what you're going to hang your hat on, it's kind of pretty tenuous. Like if the Australian dollar falls, like the only way that they'd be able to get out of this is if they based all of their valuations on the Australian dollar, and the Australian dollar would have fallen like 20% or something like that.
Right.
Like that's like really that's the only way that you stay out of recession is just to devalue.
Well, we've been
But
seeing
if everyone's devaluing at the same time, then what's to say that it's going to work anyway?
Well, what if they
There's a certain
devalue?
point.
I'm seeing it more as a grand scheme. Like they devalue the currency, they keep lowering rates, they keep devaluing the currency, bring in more foreign investing because now it's more of a deal because they're buying it for cheaper, and rates are lower, so it's a deal for an investor.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's only so much foreign investment capital that you can get before it starts becoming a burden on the rest of society. Like, you still have to have people that want to live here, right? Like,
Well, you've seen
you
the
can
mass
spend this.
exodus. You've seen the mass exodus in some of the major cities in Australia. I've seen it. People have been seeing it in California, in Vancouver. I'm one of those statistics. I left Vancouver because I'm not paying $2 million. But the problem is, all the streets are empty. All these side streets with houses and boulevards and stuff, it's empty. They still have Christmas
Yeah,
decorations from 3 years ago still up. Their grass is uncut. Some people, you are seeing it in a lot of these big cities. You're seeing this drain of population.
yeah. Well, there's going to be a brain drain. The problem that Australia has that California doesn't have is that there's not that much in terms of high skilled jobs for high income earners either. So not only do you have the fact that there's little incentive for people to stay here based on the fact of the high cost of housing, but there's also the double whammy of the fact that there's not that much in terms of high skilled jobs. So if you get an education, a tertiary level education, and you want to work in an industry that's basically going to use the full capabilities of the skills that you've learned, you have to go overseas. And like a lot of my girlfriend's friends have ended up either in New York or London.
Mm-hmm.
They don't stay in Australia, and they don't stay in Australia because there's not incentive for them to stay in Australia in the first place. Like they don't. It's very backwards. Like it's not for a young person. There's not that much incentive to stay
Mm-hmm.
because there's not that much opportunity and things are expensive. So
Yeah.
yeah, if it's going to be expensive, you might as well go somewhere where there's better job opportunities for you.
Right. If you're gonna pay the big bucks, might as well go to like New York, London,
Yeah,
or you
like a
know.
major capital city. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Right, right. Okay, so now we got that covered. Okay, so you're not seeing a recession. Yeah, we're seeing a recession. Last time you were on the show,
And it
you're
depends
saying
on what you're talking about. It depends on what you're talking about. I still see there being,
economy shrinking.
yeah. Well, apart from speculation in housing and maybe commodity prices if they're lucky, there's not that much else saying that we're going to go up. Like if you still have the constraint that the government's artificially imposed on us that we have to run a budget surplus, then you know you're kind of hoping on a wing and a prayer that commodity prices stay high
Mm-hmm.
and that people keep speculating on houses.
Yeah,
But
that's
they,
what. Yeah, that's what you're
there's
gonna have.
still there's still going to be a limitation on how productively people can allocate capital. Like when you're borrowing, if you're just investing in housing, there comes a point where there's no more speculative investment that you can make. I
Right.
mean, I don't know what that point's going to be. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I mean, I thought it would have been towards the end of this year, but I'm happy to say that I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like for the sake of my friends and family that are invested in this kind of stuff, but it still pays to hedge against that risk, whether it's in something that you can, like if you're wrong about it and it does blow up, then you need to have some kind of you know mechanism that's going to save you if
Right.
you do lose employment or you lose money on a housing asset or whatever it is.
Right. So, all right, let's move on to the whole gold and silver right now. Um, uh, I got this article here. It's actually somewhat of a, or there's two. There was an article I read yesterday, and I want to get your, you know how we were talking about this, about the 10K cash ban in Australia, and it
Yeah,
looks like we're going to see the disappearance. There's rumors of the disappearing cash going into negative rates and blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of
yeah,
rumors floating
yeah,
around, right? Now, there was one article yesterday that in Germany, people are running to
yeah.
bullion
I read
markets.
about that.
So
Yeah,
that's a, didn't I send you that? I sent you that,
yeah,
right?
because there's a limitation on how much bullion you can buy.
So why? I mean, remember Shanghai Larry sent me an email when he went to Macau?
Yeah,
Because he can't
yeah,
message me from mainland China. He went to Macau to message me, and he told me that bullion dealers are shut down. They closing
yeah,
early, and they're
yeah,
selling 20 to 30% over spot. Their gold,
yeah,
and that's pretty
yeah,
high.
yeah. I mean, especially with silver, it looks like if you're a chartist, you would say that it looks like it's the bottom of a saucer pattern,
Hmm.
which is pretty. Those are generally pretty good signals that something's going to go up in price.
Right.
But you're also seeing like very very low inflation or even deflation in a bunch of countries. Um, but you're seeing a bunch of asset inflation. So the fact that you're starting to see gold and silver start to take off a little bit again
Seven
at the same
weeks.
time.
7 weeks.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that you've seen both of them take off at the same time, you wouldn't really see um, without there being a large amount of liquidity being pumped in. You don't generally see precious metals and equities rally at the same time, unless there's about to be a spike in volatility. And if there's a spike in volatility and the markets, the indices have just been going one way, then you'd expect the volatility to push markets down, not up.
Could we see an indication of melt up?
I mean, you could. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it happen basically since the '90s, but
Okay.
there's not any reason to say that it can't happen because it has happened in the past.
Right.
But um, it remains to be seen whether or not we see a melt up. But if we do, then there's going to be volatility regardless,
Of
because
course.
it'll be a melt up that then is kind of unstable, rather than just being like a slow build up.
Okay, we got this other article here. I kind of wanted to throw this up. It's from a couple of hours ago. Petrodollar
So
shock. Russia could invert part of its national wealth fund in gold. Now, we know what happened when Gaddafi did this, and when I think Saddam Hussein tried to do that, and a couple of other world leaders tried to fund their national wealth into gold.
yeah,
Yeah. What is Russia playing here? I know China is we don't know anything about China, but what we know about China from what we hear is they're buying up a lot of gold, and they're telling their citizens to buy up gold. So now they're telling citizens that go on vacation to buy as much gold as possible and bring it home. That's what they're telling their citizens that are vacationing, right?
yeah. So that's like a lack of confidence in foreign exchange, I guess. I don't know whether that's them having a lack of faith in their own currency, or whether it's them having a lack of faith in other currencies, or whether there's another plan altogether. Like if they're saying, because I don't know that much about what you're talking about at the moment. I have to look into it myself before I form an opinion. But the idea that they're telling people to buy gold, I mean, the fact is, the Chinese government seems like they're pretty happy to take people's assets off them whenever they want,
Yes.
right? Like, so I think the inference is that they're telling people to buy gold so that they can then seize it at a later point in time.
It happened in the States in the 1930s, but
Yeah.
yeah, but
Well, I
but
mean, it happened what um, post Bretton Woods, right?
that's right.
So yeah,
Okay, I just want to read this real quick here. In the past 2 years,
sure,
Russia has been quite explicit in shifting its preference between fiat in a form of the world's reserve currency, the US dollar, and hard assets, i.e., gold. After liquidating almost all of its treasury holdings in mid 2018, roughly around the same time relations between US and Russia hit rock bottom and started digging. Russian gold holdings continued to climb and just a few months back rose to record more than doubling in the past 4 years. So Russia's got something under its sleeve right now. China's got something under its sleeve right now. India's going down right now economically, and
yeah,
they're getting tensions right now with Pakistan again.
yeah. I
And
feel like that's pretty self-induced, though. Like, I mean, basically starting a race war, or not a race war, but
xenophobia.
kind of, yeah, it was xenophobia.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So do you think these bigger countries, these bigger economies are moving towards gold? I'm just trying to think of Venezuela. No, nothing with Venezuela. I'm just trying to think who else. A lot of Argentinians are buying gold too, but the problem is in Argentina, they're limited to buying $200 US per month in gold.
Yeah, there'd be. I think that's because they're trying to prop up their own currency, but the Argentinian currency's been in the dumps for a really long time. They've had really high inflation for a really long time as well.
Well,
So I kind of think
Chile and
that
Argentina are the two lowest biggest losing currencies in the last 3 months.
yeah, they would be. I
And
mean, if they're losing more than Venezuela, then that's saying something. But
yeah,
I don't even know that Venezuela has a currency that's being traded, is there? I mean,
they're still using
you
bolivares.
wouldn't.
Like they're still using bolivares, but they still have their hands on U.S. dollars, and they're trading.
I mean, they'd be using US dollars as proxy, right? Like
Right.
most of the time, you'd have like a grey or black market for US dollars, which would have a premium over what the market rate is set at, and
Right.
then you'd
Cuba
have
was
people
like
that,
that too.
yeah. I mean, but I don't see it's effectively the same thing as saying, oh well, there's no reason to trade in US dollars, so we might as well trade in commodities, whether the commodities is things like cigarettes or crude oil or anything else that they can get their hands on. But something that retains its purchasing power is effectively what I assume people would be doing. The people that are remaining in Venezuela anyway.
Hmm.
Like, there's no reason that you'd want to hold something that's just going to lose all of its value. And they're
Oh,
smart enough to know that that's what's happening.
okay. Let's shift over to China a bit. Now, I mean, there's only so much we had. What's his name? President Xi there, Z or Xi, I can't even say
Yeah,
his name.
Z.
Basically, I don't know if you saw his speech and debt and they're in this major how would you say it, mitigation of financial risks right now,
Yeah,
and
they're writing off a bunch of non-performing loans, those sorts of things, and letting bonds fail. I mean, the question is what scale that's going to happen at. Because if it happens at a small scale, and they're just doing it to clear out a bunch of problem assets, then I don't have a problem with it. But if this is a signal of something that's much more widespread in their economy, then you start to see that there's bigger problems.
so well he's appointed several financial experts, right? And they're pushing their forecast GDP 2020. They want to push it to 5.9% with
Yeah,
these
below
with the
six.
with these trade world wars.
Yeah.
I mean, if the West
I
doesn't.
mean, it has to happen at some point, right? The 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 majority of the growth that China's had has been credit driven, and the credit impulse in China has just been slowing and slowing and slowing,
Mhm.
like it has everywhere else in the world. So there's no reason to assume that their economy is going to grow at 6% every year. I mean, if it does, then there's going to come a point where it goes from being 6 or 7% to being negative.
Right.
And when that happens, like I can't imagine how many loans are going to get written off. But they'll be written off without the government having much choice. Like they're not going to be able to step in and say, "Oh, we're going to step in and try to save $20 trillion worth of securitization," because they just won't be able to do it.
No, of course. And I know they've bailed out three major banks in the last couple of months. They've let two of them collapse, or they left two of
Yeah,
them kind of falter. And then what else do they do? Then there's people like condo developers that are doing like exclusive sales on the empty units that never sold in some of the condos, and you're getting people fighting or street fighting with the property managers, literally damaging their property and damaging their vehicle outside. And I have articles on this because people are demanding a partial refund on the condo they bought because they're trying to clearance out the rest of the units. It's not good, dude.
yeah. I mean, it's really hard to say what is going to happen long term because the biggest issue that we face at the moment is political uncertainty. Like you don't really know. Like in Australia, we've had five prime ministers in the last 10 years. So there's kind of a pretty low confidence level that um, we're going to have continuity. In the US, what you've got Donald Trump. I mean, there's a strongman kind of figure, but I feel like you've got strongmen everywhere. and they don't really have that much of a long-term strategy. It's just
Here and now.
undo whatever has been done, and then see what we can do from there. And I mean, there's a reason why some of these things, as much as people might dislike them, there's a reason why some of these rules exist in the first place, like global cooperation and those sorts of things, to plan for whether it's a decreasing rate of growth of population or whether it's um, a slowing economy or those sorts of things. There's some kind of global agreement on how do we go about mitigating this. Whereas now it's just like every man for themselves,
Right.
and there's obviously going to be issues with that at some point, and it's just when they show themselves up, like what do you do to try and mitigate that, and how long do you spend trying to fix whatever it is that comes about based on that being the case.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's just a perfect response. Okay, so we got here the top 5 trends that will go on to define the decade. So it's kind of good to kind of look at some of these trends here. So we're going to go over the top 5 trends, especially people looking to invest in markets or looking to kind of look at where these trends are headed. So number 1, the central banks pouring money and credit into financial system in an effort to keep the economy moving forward. That's number 1. You agree with that? Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I
of course.
totally agree with that.
I'm looking at oil at the moment. I don't really know what's going to happen with it, and I've been on the fence for a really long time. It's really hard to say, oh, it's going to do this or it's going to do that, because it's particularly volatile and it still hasn't broken out of range bound trading patterns. I mean, it kind of looks like it's going to melt up a little bit, but it's still so hard to say. I mean, I haven't really seen oil and gold rally at the same time. The only time that's happened is when there's been a large commodity rally.
That was
So
I think
that
it
would
was
have,
81, 82 where they went crazy.
but
81,
they wouldn't have
82
gone.
gold doubled in price in like 2 months.
But I'm pretty sure that happened. There was like a Saudi oil issue, or there's like some kind of political issue. It
Oh,
was either in
you talking about
Iran or
during
Saudi
the Arab
Arabia.
Spring?
No, the Arab Spring was 2011, wasn't it?
Okay, but and then there was no, there was one way back with the it wasn't the Contra, it was the
Or the Iran Contra scandal that you're talking.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah, and then
mean,
that there was huge oil issues there. Then remember when the gas stations were out of gas and stuff? That was in
yeah,
what 79, 80?
yeah. I mean, I don't remember because I wasn't alive, but
Right.
I've read about it. Yeah,
Okay. Okay, number 2, the growing number of social ills, sick and dysfunctional people. I mean, we're seeing it around us.
That's the other thing that I'm kind of worried about as well, is that um, when you start trying to let religion dictate what you can and can't do for areas where they've got high amounts of like disease and populations with a higher percentage of concentration of disease, like for countries like Mozambique and stuff like that, where they rely almost exclusively on foreign aid money to make sure that they don't spread disease and that they can be actually diagnosed with those particular illnesses. If they don't know they've got it, then all of a sudden they don't have access to abort, regardless of what you think of abortion. They don't have access to that to make sure that the next generation doesn't actually have an increase in the concentration of the disease, and then you can't get treatment for it.
What about
And
dysfunctional people with our media?
yeah,
Our media is really screwing a lot of people's minds up. And I had a gentleman on my show the other day, and he told me to just stop watching television.
yeah, I actually think that there should be a limitation on how much you consume, whether it's social media, television, all those sorts of things. There needs to be a limit on it. There needs to be some kind of interaction with people, either if it's people that you disagree with. Like there's people I talk to that I don't agree with most of the time, but if even if you're spending your time talking through the issue, you can at least see someone else's point of view.
Right.
Whereas if you're on social media or you're on television, you're making the choice to what it is that you consume.
Right.
So you're only going to get something that confirms your own bias,
That is scary,
and
and that
that
that is very scary. That's one of the scary ones. Number 3, political shifts and polarization are rapidly increasing. Populism
Yeah.
has been growing for several years. When combined with surging inequality and disconnect, people rise up in protest. So back to that whole square one thing we're talking about. When people have nothing to lose, what do? They fight back,
They
right?
lose it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of Gerald Salente's sayings, isn't it? It's when people have lost everything, the only thing left to do is lose it,
And fight back,
or
yeah.
something along
I've been
those
saying
lines.
wait. I've been saying that for years. I keep bringing up that little video why they speak Portuguese in Brazil. I don't know if you remember on Mike in the Night or Trends in the Housing Market.
Mm.
I brought up that video several times. It's a 2-minute clip. Why they speak Portuguese in Brazil? Because the Portuguese dominated with love and wealth and trinkets and trade, where the Spanish dominated with violence. Right?
Well, the Spanish also brought about large amounts of disease as well. It wasn't
Oh
just
yeah, yeah, big time.
um, like if you look at the spread of bubonic plague and those sorts of things, there wasn't really that much hygiene. And this is the thing that worries me now. If you've got globalization and you have,
Well, you got typhus. You got typhus on the streets of L.A.
yeah, but that's the biggest. This is the problem is that they're not looking at health as an economic issue. If all of a sudden you get a bunch of people that are sick or homeless on the street and they're not getting health care, and all of a sudden they start infecting people that are working in the economy and that are productive members of the economy, and they start spreading it within their own circles, that has to have implications on their economy. It's not just the fact that they can't afford healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone can't get insulin, that's a little bit different to someone having typhoid or someone having something like a precursor to bird flu or something like that that they can then spread because they haven't been able to go in and get a flu shot. Like that's not something that I think has been like. There's always this discussion about you shouldn't die because you can't afford healthcare. It's not just that. It's the fact that you shouldn't make someone else die because you're not able to get healthcare, and then they spread the disease throughout their workplace.
Right, or their friends and family. That's correct.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
let me quickly put this video. I've been talking about this. When people don't have anything to lose, what do? They fight back. Here's the video I've been playing. I don't know for the last year and a half here on Mike of the Night, but I'm playing it tonight with Andrew. So here goes.
Look, I would love to expand my operations into your countries. But quite frankly, your business methods are too violent. Let me tell you a true story.
True story, guys.
500 years ago, the Portuguese and the Spanish came here, each trying to get the country from their natives. The Spanish arrived, guns blazing, determined to prove us boss.
Right, typical Spanish.
The natives killed every single Spaniard. Personally, I prefer the methods of the Portuguese. They came bearing gifts, mirrors, scissors, trinkets. Things that the natives couldn't get on their own. But to continue receiving them, they had to work for the Portuguese. And that's why all Brazilians speak Portuguese today. Now, if you dominate the people with violence,
Yep.
they will eventually fight back because they have nothing to lose.
Yep. Yeah, sorry, I just had to bring that back up because you brought that up, so I had to just quickly bring up that video there. Yeah, once people have nothing to lose, what do? They fight back.
yeah. But I think you've seen that throughout South America. You're seeing it in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing it basically anywhere where there's a large amount of inequality. But I think it's going to happen in the US as well. And I said, I think in like 2017 or 2018 that I think at some point there'll be a civil war, but I don't think it will be just political. I don't think it will just be Democrats versus Republicans. I think it will be rich people versus poor people, and there's rich Republicans and rich Democrats that will end up being on the same side of the fence, so to speak.
Right.
The thing that people have a problem with is a concentration of wealth and a distinct unwillingness to distribute any of the wealth in any other way than to accumulate wealth in the hands of people that already have it.
Right. Well, yeah.
Now,
That's
I
that's
mean, I don't think that there's this split between Republicans and Democrats. Like Republicans aren't just all, oh, we want wealth, and we don't want to spread it. And I don't think all Democrats are, we want to give all our wealth away. I don't think that's how it breaks down. It's more people that do have wealth versus people that don't. And they've tried to make it into like social issues rather than economic issues, because when you start to actually address the economic issues, both sides of the fence look pretty bad. I mean,
right. But this is our mainstream media, right? So,
for sure.
okay, number 4, as technology and artificial intelligence advance, those in power are moving forward using these tools to turn us into pawns.
Which tools? Well, social media. Absolutely. I mean,
Internet
it's very,
and censoring
yeah.
us on the internet. We
But
have to
even
self-censor ourselves, yeah?
think about 10 years ago, how broad and diverse the ideas were that were on social media in comparison to now.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like it's become this like well polished machine, right? It's a marketing machine.
Right.
Whereas before it was very like hackerish and it wasn't all that polished. Like when you start looking at even like think about PewDiePie and things like that, like people that have a lot of subscribers on YouTube. Even if you think about their own videos, what they were 10 years ago in comparison to what they are now. I mean, 10 years ago it was kind of just someone with a webcam just talking into a webcam, whereas now they're spending $10,000, $20,000 on video camera equipment. They'll spend another $2,000 or $3,000 on video editing software.
I'm still old
And then
school. I use
there's all
my
that kind of
phone.
stuff. Yeah, but I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I would prefer, in fact, that someone just does something that's on the fly rather than having this really polished and scripted image that people have to project something that they may not necessarily be.
Right.
I mean, I don't have a problem with people being a certain way. Just be honest about it. Don't make out like you're this one thing when you're not.
Okay, number 5. Concern over climate change is on the rise. Sadly, few of those talking about it see cut and waste as a priority.
Yeah. See, that's the biggest thing for me is reduction of consumption, more efficient utilization of water, and better mechanisms for recycling waste. Those are the big three things. I mean, everyone talks about they talk about cutting carbon emissions. Sure, but doing the other three things, you're going to do that anyway. So it should be more about things like the right to repair movement, the a rejection of fast fashion, those sorts of things.
Right.
And I don't think it's not in the economic interest of the people that are trying to sell products to consumers to talk about that. It's more beneficial to talk about, we're a sustainable company, we pay X amount of money to plant trees. But planting trees doesn't stop people from cutting them down or cutting 3 more down to then do whatever it is that they're going to do, or whether it's land clearing or whether it's making plastic objects that then get put into the ocean,
Right.
or whether it's just wasting water in the middle of a drought. Like all of those things happen, but there hasn't been that level of focus on it. It's always about carbon emissions, carbon emissions, carbon emissions. That's not the only thing that contributes to human consumption.
And you know what, to add to this is all in all, it looks like we're not trending towards more peace and sustainability. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm not trying to be gloom and doom and Mr. Doom here. I'm just saying that it's just, we're not trending towards peace and progressive, you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
We're not trending.
No, I mean, people try to tell you that we are, but I really don't think we are. And if we were, you wouldn't have, you would have more diverse types of leaders, regardless of whether you agree with them. You wouldn't have leaders of the world fitting to one structure or to one type of mold. Like the fact that you have Narendra Modi, Xi Jinping, Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, Scott Morrison in
Scotty Morris,
Australia.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you have leaders that are of that mold tells you that we're going in a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's generally, I mean, I don't know whether it's a universal truth or whether it's a rejection of the liberal rules based order or whatever it is that they want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it kind of seems like people are moving away from that. And I don't know whether it's a conscious effort or whether it's happening subconsciously or whether there's kind of been a nudge for people to think in that way. I really can't tell you because
Okay.
I don't know how everyone thinks, but that's kind of what's happened.
Okay, let's
Some of it is the fact that they don't have a choice. I mean, you don't really vote for a government in China,
right.
and some of it is that's generally what the thought process is.
Okay, we're gonna reshuffle. We're gonna a very important article that came out in May 16, 2019. It talks about another reshuffling of the world's 10 worst problems. Let's go over them real quick. Here we go. This is what we're looking forward to. This is what they're kind of predicting, or they're not post-dicting, they're obviously predicting a lot of this stuff, and they're predictionists. So let's look at number 10. Demographic and aging population. As the population grows older, euthanasia and quality of life become an issue. The must be handled in a fair, honest, humane, and compassionate way. The alternatives is too simple. Let many older people wither and die hungry while existing in pain and squalor. So we're going to see, obviously, a bigger aging population. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I also think that euthanasia should be a choice. It shouldn't be something where you're forced to live forever. And this is one of those sorts of things. Like the Earth definitely has limited resources, and the question becomes: do you want those? Who do you want those resources to go to?
Right.
Because 500 years ago there wasn't almost 8 billion people on this Earth. There was more 500 years ago. You'd be lucky to have
500
a billion
years ago,
people.
if you lived to 40, you were good.
Yeah, well, I mean, there wasn't the level of human healthcare that there is now, but that imposes its own problems, and the problems become if people don't live for 40 to 50 years, then they change their consumption habits based on how long they expect to live. Like if you expect to live for 40 years, then your consumption is peaking at 20. Whereas if you expect to live for 80 years, your consumption is peaking at 40 or
Right.
50 or something like that. Now, if that's the case, if your consumption is peaking between 40 to 50, that's an extra 30 years worth of large amounts of consumption.
That's
So
correct.
it's got to have an impact on the resources that you use, regardless of whether or not you think it's climate change or whether you think it's population that has an impact on things, whether it's any, it has to have an impact.
Okay.
And when you compound that with a larger number of people, it blows out on a scale that you can't really calculate, or you can calculate it, but it's kind of not nice to do it.
Right. Yeah, it's inhumane at some points. But all right,
Yeah.
number 9, hunger and starvation. Severe malnutrition can make life unbearable, and because of it, many people only go through motions of being alive. People that are starving cannot learn to take the role in society. Starvation and addressing the need for basic sanitation must be addressed. We're seeing this happening in LA County right now, where there's a lot of people literally starving. They just
Yeah.
they're and people and the sanitation and the they have in California they have this poop number you call for them to come and clean the poop on the street.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
But
it's
I mean,
yeah.
but you'd have to think, with larger and larger populations in the third world, and they don't really have sanitation, there has to be some point where there's like a big disease that comes out of that area, and
Yeah,
we can't
plague,
really
a
deal with
plague
it.
or a pandemic
Yeah,
of
yeah.
some sorts.
Well, I mean, that's effectively what happened in the area of the era of conquerors, or the era of
Globalization,
colonialism,
colonialism.
or even before what you would call globalization. they had large amounts of disease because there'd be large percentage of the population that weren't exposed to a particular disease. All of a sudden, you get colonialists come in. They have been exposed. The people that survive it are the ones that end up being there, and they spread it to the people that haven't had it. So all of a sudden, a large percentage of the population dies. And I
Kind
mean,
of
I
reminds
think
me of
that's
laundering money. More and more and more and more money being introduced to an economy that can't handle it.
yeah. I mean, it's different types of disease, right?
Right. I'm just kind of throwing that in the mix. Okay. Number 8, income and inequality and economic stability. The uber rich should not become exempt from all common woes and untouchable. The uber rich and political elite should not compromise a special class who are immune and able to ignore the rules of society. Nor should the masses be deemed deserving of an equal share of the wealth society creates merely by being born. Fairness in handling the world's economic systems and currencies that allow for a solid way to exchange goods and services is necessary, or other world support systems will suffer or fail.
Yeah. I mean,
Daddy, no.
it becomes really hard to figure out um, at what point do you say this should be something that's like the base level of what you get for
Right.
being born, right? Like everyone says, oh, you shouldn't be given this for being born. Sure, I agree with that. But there's some point where, like, you don't just literally let people lie on the street and die for when they can be helped.
Right.
But I think there's also a limitation on the expectation of the help that you should be getting. Like, you shouldn't just expect, yeah, you shouldn't just expect to be born
Right. And have
and,
like
and
a
have
silver spoon.
everything. Yeah.
All right. Number 7, a man's inability to take control of his future by creating responsive and responsible government. The masses have been lulled into complacency in many ways. We are all slaves. This is a new role for man, but we can think that should make an effort to do so. We must push our chosen leaders to do the right thing and make long-term plans that are sustainable. We must shape our
Yeah.
future and values of society in which we live. Sadly, a sharp rise in Orwellian trends, which lead to police states in threatening concept of freedom in countries across the globe. Now, hold on. I just read an article a few minutes ago before I talked to you, before I got you on the show, that Sydney or police in New South Wales, Australia, are given more and more permissions to go into your private stuff.
Yeah, all the time. I think there's two examples of that, two big examples of that in Australia. The first one is the amount of authority that police have in Australia to basically do whatever they want. Like, they're strip searching underage people at music venues and things like that. And they've not really, I mean, it's not really something that used to happen, but all of a sudden you get this abuse of power because you're allowed to do it rather than any other reason. It's just the fact that they're allowed to do it, so they go out and do these things that they wouldn't be able to do before.
Right.
Whereas, and the other one is when the government went in and raided journalists for doing a story about, I'm pretty sure it was a story about, it's either about politicians or about defense. And they basically went through and made sure that, it wasn't something that was either classified or was a national security issue, but they still had journalists raided both at their place of work and at their home. So, that's not really something that used to happen in the past.
Right. Okay, number 6. The last few years stand as proof of man's cruelty to man. Strife between religions and tribes must end.
I'll agree with that. I mean, I'm not a particularly religious person. You know that.
I know.
But I'm also someone that I'm more someone that believes we should treat human beings well, rather than we should treat human beings well from a particular religion. I don't really care what religion you are, as long as you're someone that's not going out of their way to harm other people. Then, you know, I will help you, sort of thing. Like that's the way that it should be anyway. That's the way I think it should be.
Right.
But again, people are going to have their own views on that.
So number 5 goes about what we talked about in number 10 and 9. And number 5 is creating an environment that allows and encourages people to develop fulfilling lives. This means improving the educational system and having an opportunity to find fulfilling work, seek happiness, and express their individuality. So,
Yeah, it's like that whole pursuit of happiness
right.
that people always talk about. I feel like there's a lot less of that in this day and age than what there used to be.
Right.
You might have to cook chicken.
You having chicken?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I could hear that. We're almost done. We're almost done.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, but I think it's not really the pursuit of happiness anymore. It's more like how to get by. So there's not the same.
It's pay as you go now. It's pay as you go.
Yeah. Well, it's not even pay as you go. It's just pay all the time for anything that you ever get.
Right.
And pay a lot. Like you have to pay a premium for anything that's deemed to be worthwhile. You pay a lot for, much more so than what you did in the past.
Right. Right.
Like there's trinkets and things like that you don't pay as much for, but they're like it's this whole idea of like inflation versus deflation, right? Like everyone will say, oh, but there's not as much inflation, but it's only in the things that get measured that people don't care about. Like if you are asked whether there's been inflation in your healthcare, the answer that almost everyone's going to give you is yes. They're not going to say, oh no, healthcare's gotten cheaper, because it hasn't gotten cheaper, but everyone cares about it.
Right.
Whereas your flat screen TV might be cheaper. So, I mean, it's the amount of, it's how much you actually care about that sort of thing. Like I don't really care that much about TV, but I care that I can go to a doctor and it's not going to set me broke.
Right. Right. Of course. Number 4, wasting Earth's limited natural resources by not conserving the continued destruction of our environment. I contend that many of the green solutions being proposed, such as ethanol fuel, are not a solution at all, just ways for business to profit. A solution is truly green unless the environmental cost of maintaining it is very low.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, there's always people trying to cut corners, regardless of what it is that you're talking about. Like you could be talking about something that's like 99% of the way there, but the 100% of the way there thing is the only thing that will work, or the only thing that's going to work long term anyway.
Right.
So as much as it's nice to get almost there, you have to go all the way. And this is not from like some greeny perspective. This is from if you don't go all the way, then you're going to end up running out of resources. I mean, the biggest resource that people don't really value is water. At the end of the day.
We're going to have water wars. I've been talking about water wars.
Yeah.
I think one of my first Mike in the Nights 2 years ago, we had a whole show on water wars.
Yeah.
With the amount of rivers drying up in China and like the lack of water and in certain areas, I think we're going to enter huge water wars. I honestly think so.
I mean, the precious commodities that everyone seems to think are precious in this day and age is data and water. I mean, you can live without crude oil. I mean, it's hard, but you can do it. But you can't live without water.
Right. Right. It's one of the basic elements to sustain life on Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 3.
I mean, you could go entirely solar. That's the thing. Like, if you really wanted to like live out on the land, you could, and you'd go entirely solar. Like, I mean, it'd be expensive, but it can be done.
Right.
Whereas,
because we're only using less than 1% of the sun's energy that's being shone on us every day.
Yeah.
So, though it ties into number 3, pollution and the resulting climate change it may bring. This is showing up in oceans that are sick and being depleted of life. This also may result in rising oceans and crop failures. Either scenario will remain massive suffering across the world or could tear the social fabric and alter our day day-to-day lives.
Yeah, well, we're already seeing that in Australia.
Right.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, you start having bushfires for 3-4 months of the year, and their harvest season. If the harvest season can't happen every year, and you run out of water as well, the agricultural part of the society fails. You have to import food, even though you're on one of the largest land masses in the world. It's kind of nonsensical,
Yep.
but that's the world we live in.
Again, it's all. I think it stems to government in the end. It all stems to who's governing us, right? Number 2, overpopulation. This is the overriding problem facing Earth and the most difficult to address. If the problem of overpopulation is not addressed, all other problems on the list will likely become much greater. Many people still rejoice in an idea that we should be fruitful and multiplying, ignoring or oblivious to the problems it creates in the long running. The quality of life in many ways is more important than quantity.
Yeah, I agree with that. See, this is the thing. Like, I've grown up with a dad that's had end-stage renal failure for most of my life, and we've always talked about that sort of thing. It's always been, it doesn't matter how long you're living for. If you live for another 50 years, but you're living in a wheelchair for the whole time, and you've experienced what it's like to not live in that sort of situation, then it becomes depressing after a long period of time to just be confined to living a fraction of the life that you were living, regardless of whether or not that's like hearing, how much exercise you can do, how much you can travel, any of the things that you would want to do in your normal life that you're not able to do. I mean, I'm not saying you should go out and commit suicide, but I'm also saying if it becomes a choice between you living another 20 years and you stopping someone else from living the potential life that they could live.
Right.
I mean, that's the question. It's almost like the prisoner's dilemma, right? That whole question of if there's someone on a railway station, or if there's a train track coming, or there's a train coming and it's going to either run over one person or 2 people or a baby or something like that. What's the choice that you make?
Right.
And I don't really think it's ever been, well, it probably has been by a lot of people, but it's not really the most commonly expressed viewpoint on this particular issue.
Right. I just wanted to throw that out there because obviously it ties in with pollution and ties in with all the other stuff. Now, number 1 is kind of a little bit off topic from everything else that we spoke about. Weapons of mass destruction. This is not only includes nuclear bombs, chemical weapons, but drones
But
and
biological.
Huh?
Biological as well.
Yeah, weapons, drones, and other killer robots now being developed. One big mistake, we're going down the wrong path in developing new weapons that could change life as we know it. So this is like,
Did you see that Russian weapon that just got
tell us
27 times the speed of sound?
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's hypersonic. I'm pretty sure it's the first ever hypersonic weapon that's been created and tested. That we know of anyway.
I saw an image of it, like a drawing of what it looks like. It's like, wow, that's nice, but how is that going to feed the starving people in the?
I don't think they particularly care. I don't think they care all that much about starving people.
Yeah, and like I said,
we're all
pawns on a chessboard.
This is part of the reason why. I mean, I do like religion in the idea that it's used as like a mechanism for promoting charity and good works and helping people out. But I don't like when it's perverted for political gain. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is what happens a lot in Russia. Like they use Orthodox Christianity as a mechanism for justifying some of their actions, even when their actions are less than good in terms of their intentions.
Well, the whole religion thing's been twisted. My guy is Jesus, right? He's a good guy, right? He told you to love your neighbor. He told you to, he banned all the money changers or the money lenders. He's my type of guy. You know what I'm saying? He's my guy, Jesus, right? And everything else, I follow the Prince of Peace, and that's just me, right?
Yeah.
So everything's been twisted and manipulated into a business from
That's what I
religion.
don't like about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But even if you look at the teachings of Buddha, a lot of it is very constructive and very positive, right?
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of these teachings from a lot of these religions, some of it makes absolute sense. Like, some of it is like, love your neighbor, because you know what, you might need
Yeah.
him one day.
Yeah. And even if you don't, I mean,
At least be
there shouldn't
respectful
be
to
any.
each other, right?
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyways, Andrew, I'm gonna let you go because we're talking for an hour and 15 minutes here, and I'm gonna let you have. What are you having, lunch or dinner there?
I'm having dinner. Yeah, we're making
Okay.
chicken and some pasta.
Nice. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. All right. We'll keep in touch. Thanks for giving us some insights on what's going down under there, and just keep your eyes and ears open and let us know if there's anything you need. Come on the show.
I mean,
Let us know.
if there's something that I see that I think is particularly interesting, then I'll make a point of talking about it.
Sure.
But I think we're kind of in this weird, like, in between regime. I think that's where we are at the moment. Like, we're kind of in between either a big rally or a big fall, but it's not much. It's kind of like just muddling on at the moment. But I don't think
we could
that's
be on the cusp of an event horizon, or we could just be lingering around.
Yeah, but I mean, lingering isn't something that happens for a really long time unless you live in Japan.
Right.
And again, I haven't seen those sorts of market dynamics in our markets in Australia or in the US or in Canada for that matter.
Right.
So I feel like there has to be a point where it either melts up or it melts down. And we kind of haven't really seen all that much happening. So I'm waiting for there to be a point where there's a big spike in volatility and what direction the market goes when that happens.
Right. Okay. Well, keep it. We'll keep your finger on the pulse there, and we'll keep you on the pulse, and keep us updated on if there's some major shifts that's going to basically affect humanity.
I will do.
All right, Andrew. You have a good night. You have a good evening, and we'll talk very soon.
Sounds good. All right.
Good.
Catch you later.
Goodbye.
Yeah.